The fog rolled thick and relentless across the Hudson that morning, transforming Manhattan's razor-edge skyline into something ghostly and uncertain. Natalie Carson gripped her steering wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening against the leather. The sleek Tesla slowed as she squinted through the windshield, the road ahead disappearing into a wall of gray. At 32, Natalie had mastered the art of control. As CEO of Carson Pharmaceuticals, she commanded a workforce of thousands, navigated billion-dollar deals, and faced down boardrooms of men who underestimated her daily. Yet here, enveloped in nature's sudden blindness, that illusion of control felt paper-thin. A shape materialized on the roadside. A man, shoulders hunched in frustration, pacing beside an ancient Volvo with its hood propped open. Steam rose from the engine, mingling with the fog. A small figure sat inside the car, a child, face pressed against the passenger window. Natalie's finger hovered over the button that would lock her doors. In New York, caution was second nature. But something, perhaps the slump of the man's shoulders or the glimpse of the waiting child, made her pull over instead. "Need help?" she called through her partially lowered window. The man turned. His face carried the weathered lines of someone who'd seen more than his years suggested. Perhaps 36, maybe younger. His eyes, though tired, remained alert and assessing. "We're fine," he answered reflexively. The little girl inside the car rolled down her window. "Dad, just ask her for help. We've been here forever." Natalie found herself smiling at the child's exasperation. 8 years old, she guessed, with dark curls and bright, intelligent eyes that somehow reminded Natalie of herself at that age. "Battery's dead," the man admitted reluctantly, "waiting for roadside assistance. But they're backed up with the fog." Natalie surprised herself by stepping out of her car. The damp air immediately clung to her tailored suit, worth more than this man probably earned in a month. "Pop the hood," she said, reaching into her trunk for the jumper cables she'd never used. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know how to jump a car?" "My father insisted I learn basic mechanics before I could drive." She moved with unexpected confidence, connecting the cables with practiced efficiency. "Not everyone grows up with AOAA on speed dial." 20 minutes later, the old Volvo hummed back to life. The man, Jack Bennett, as he'd introduced himself, looked at Natalie with newfound respect. "I owe you one," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You saved our morning, Ms. Carson," she replied. "Natalie Carson." Recognition flickered across his face. "Carson Pharmaceuticals?" She nodded, instantly regretting the admission. Her name usually changed interactions, created a distance she didn't always want. The little girl bounded out of the car, extending a small hand solemnly. "I'm Lily. Thank you for helping my dad. He gets grumpy when things break." Jack's face softened with embarrassment. "Lily?" "It's fine," Natalie laughed, genuinely this time. "Honesty is refreshing." As she drove away, Natalie glanced in her rear-view mirror at the father and daughter. Something about them lingered in her mind. Perhaps the way Jack had looked at her without the usual mixture of intimidation and calculation she encountered daily, or the way Lily had spoken with such disarming directness. She pushed the thought away as Manhattan's skyline solidified through the thinning fog. She had an empire to run, and sentimentality wasn't in the schedule. The 50th floor boardroom of Carson Pharmaceuticals gleamed with power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of the city, and the burnished mahogany table reflected the faces of 12 board members, each worth millions in their own right. 30 days until our IPO, and projections are solid," Natalie stated, advancing through her presentation with clinical precision. "First-year public trading estimates put us at a $4.2 billion valuation." Maxwell Gray, the company's CFO, leaned forward slightly. At 40, he exuded the cold confidence of old money and entitlement. His voice carried the faintest edge whenever he addressed her. "Impressive numbers, Natalie. Though I wonder if we're being cautious enough about the Phase 3 trial results. The question hung in the air, seemingly innocent yet barbed. Maxwell had been pushing for faster advancement of their cardiovascular drug pipeline despite Natalie's insistence on additional safety protocols. The FDA requires thorough testing for a reason, Maxwell, she replied evenly. I won't rush trials to hit arbitrary deadlines. The meeting adjourned, but Natalie remained seated, rubbing her temples as the board members filed out. Only Dr. Eleanor Hughes, the company's 65-year-old co-founder and Natalie's longtime mentor, lingered behind. He's gunning for your chair, Eleanor said simply, settling her slender frame into a seat beside Natalie. Has been since his father stepped down, and I got the promotion instead of him. Eleanor's eyes softened. How are you sleeping? I'm not, Natalie admitted, reaching for the prescription bottle tucked discreetly in her purse. These help sometimes. Pills aren't the answer, Eleanor warned. Neither is working until midnight every night. What else is there? Natalie asked, her voice quieter than intended. Eleanor patted her hand. That, my dear, is the question worth answering. Later that afternoon, as Natalie reviewed quarterly reports, her building's emergency alarm blared through the speakers. Within minutes, her assistant rushed in. The electrical systems failed in the East Wing. They're bringing in an emergency technician. Natalie glanced at her watch. Her investor presentation was in 2 hours, and the digital displays were in the affected section. Get it fixed, now. The technician arrived promptly, toolbox in hand, and with him, a small girl with a sketchbook tucked under her arm. Natalie stared in disbelief at Jack Bennett and his daughter Lily from the morning's roadside encounter. You work here? She asked, unable to mask her surprise. Building maintenance, he replied simply. Specialized in electrical systems. Maxwell appeared at her office doorway, his cool gaze taking in the scene. Children aren't allowed on the executive floor, Natalie. Security protocols. Before she could respond, Lily spoke up. I won't touch anything important. Dad had no one to watch me today because Mrs. Finnegan has the flu. Natalie found herself stepping between Maxwell and the child. She can wait in my office while her father works. I'll take responsibility. Maxwell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Your presentation is in 2 hours. The Peterson group won't wait. Then we better let Mr. Bennett get to work, she replied firmly. As Jack left to inspect the electrical system, Lily settled on Natalie's office sofa, opening her sketchbook to reveal detailed drawings of human hearts. Anatomically correct rather than Valentine shapes. That's impressive artwork, Natalie observed, curious about the unusual subject matter for a child. Dad used to be a heart doctor, Lily explained, shading the left ventricle with careful precision. He has these big medical books. I like copying the pictures. Natalie smiled, returning to her computer. The silence was comfortable until Lily wandered to her desk, eyes catching on a folder marked Project Orpheus. What's that? The girl asked, pointing to the document. Just work. Boring grown-up stuff, Natalie replied, moving to close the folder. But Lily had already glimpsed the molecular diagram inside. Her small finger traced the chemical structure. That looks like my mom's medicine, she said quietly. The one she took before she died. Natalie froze, something cold settling in her stomach. What did you say? Mom had a heart problem. She took special pills that looked like this on Dad's medical books. Lily's voice was matter of fact, but her eyes held a depth of loss no child should know. They didn't work. She died anyway. Natalie's hands trembled slightly as she opened her computer, entering her credentials to access the Orpheus database. She typed in a search parameter, her breath catching as results appeared on screen. Bennett, Sarah, age 34. Trial participant, 117. Status, deceased. The girl's mother had been part of their experimental drug trial, a trial Maxwell had overseen personally. Jack Bennett had once possessed the steadiest hands in Johns Hopkins' cardiothoracic department. Now those same hands methodically repaired electrical circuits, a skill he'd learned during military service before medical school. Each wire, each connection, work that required precision but demanded nothing of his heart. 2 years had passed since he'd held a scalpel. 2 years since he'd failed to save Sarah despite all his training. 2 years of raising Lily alone, working jobs that allowed him to be there for his daughter while they both healed. When he returned to Natalie Carson's office, he found the CEO staring at her computer screen, her face drained of color. "Ms. Carson, the system's back online. Your presentation should work fine now." She looked up, seeing him as if for the first time. "Dr. Bennett," she said quietly. "That's who you really are, isn't it?" Jack stilled. "I haven't used that title in a long time. Your wife was Sarah Bennett." It wasn't a question. "She participated in a clinical trial for one of our cardiovascular drugs." The toolbox clattered to the floor. "How do you know that?" "Dad?" Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "Lily, wait in the hallway for a minute," Jack said, his voice strained but gentle. When his daughter had reluctantly left, Jack turned to Natalie, fury building in his eyes. "You have no right to dig into my personal history." "I didn't," Natalie replied. "Lily recognized a molecular structure on my desk, said it was like her mother's medication." She turned the computer screen toward him. "Sarah was enrolled in Project Orpheus, a trial I knew nothing about until recently." Jack scanned the screen, medical training instantly interpreting the data. "These dosages, they're far beyond standard protocols. The toxicity levels alone." "Maxwell Gray authorized the accelerated trial," Natalie said. "It was kept compartmentalized, away from regular review channels. My wife died because of experimental drugs she should never have been given." Jack's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "And you're running the company responsible." "I'm trying to understand what happened." Natalie stood, maintaining her composure even as guilt washed over her. "I only discovered Orpheus existed last month. The files are heavily encrypted, access restricted." "Convenient," Jack spat. "Dad?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "My chest feels funny." Jack's anger vanished instantly, replaced by professional focus as he crossed to his daughter. Natalie watched him check Lily's pulse with practiced efficiency, his fingers finding pressure points with the muscle memory of a surgeon. Her heart rates elevated, breathing restricted. He muttered, more to himself than Natalie. "Lily, where's your medication?" "In my backpack," the girl whispered, her small hand clutching her chest. Jack retrieved a pill bottle, helping Lily take the medication. Natalie moved forward instinctively. "Should we call an ambulance?" "No hospitals," Jack said sharply, then softened his tone. "Not unless it gets worse. She has a congenital arrhythmia. Stress can trigger episodes." Natalie watched as Jack transformed before her eyes, his movements precise, his focus absolute as he monitored his daughter's breathing. This was no building maintenance worker. This was a physician whose skills had been honed through years of saving lives. "Why did you leave medicine?" she asked softly, once Lily's breathing had steadied. Jack's eyes met hers, filled with a complex mixture of grief and bitterness. "I couldn't save my wife. Then I got sued for malpractice when a patient died during a trial treatment. One I later discovered had been pushed through approval without proper testing." His voice hardened. "The insurance company that denied Sarah's experimental treatment coverage? Carson Health." The weight of his words settled between them. Carson Health, the insurance subsidiary of her own corporation. "Jack, Save it," he interrupted, gathering Lily gently into his arms. "We're leaving." "The medication Lily's taking now," Natalie asked urgently. "What is it?" "Cordyline. The only thing that works for her condition." His expression darkened. Each month's supply costs more than 2 weeks of my salary, and insurance barely covers it. Another gift from the pharmaceutical industry. As he turned to leave, Natalie called out, "Wait, I want to make this right." Jack paused in the doorway. "Some things can't be made right, Ms. Carson." After they left, Natalie sank into her chair, the magnitude of the situation crashing down upon her. Her company, her father's legacy, had potentially been conducting unauthorized trials, costing lives like Sarah Bennett's, and driving families to financial ruin. With trembling hands, she dialed Eleanor's extension. "I need to see you, now. It's about Project Orpheus." 3 days later, Jack opened his apartment door to find Natalie Carson standing in his hallway, holding a thick folder. "How did you find where I live?" he demanded. "Employee records," she admitted. "May I come in?" "It's about Sarah." Reluctantly, Jack stepped aside. The apartment was small but meticulously organized. Medical textbooks still lined one bookshelf. Photographs of happier times adorned the walls. Lily looked up from her memory game at the kitchen table, her eyes widening. "It's the car lady." Despite himself, Jack smiled slightly. "Yes, the car lady who happens to run a pharmaceutical empire." "Where's Lily's medication?" Natalie asked directly. Jack's expression hardened. "Why?" "Because I've had our research team analyzing it. The formula is remarkably similar to an experimental compound we developed 5 years ago, one that was shelved because it was deemed unprofitable despite its efficacy." She placed the folder on the table. Inside were chemical analyses, trial results, and emails, all bearing Maxwell Gray's signature. "Maxwell diverted the research," Natalie explained, her voice controlled but edged with anger. "He repackaged it as Cordyline, priced it at 4,000% above manufacturing costs, and buried the original research. Meanwhile, he pushed forward with Orpheus, a cheaper alternative with significantly higher risk factors." Jack leafed through the documents, his medical training allowing him to grasp the implications immediately. Sarah was given the high-risk version, while the safer, more effective drug was priced beyond reach for most patients, Natalie finished. "It's all about maximizing profit margins." Their eyes met across the table, the shared understanding of the injustice hanging between them. "What do you want from us?" Jack asked finally. "Your expertise, your testimony." Natalie leaned forward. "Help me expose what's happening before we go public with our IPO, before more patients like Sarah are put at risk." Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Jack and Natalie sat at his kitchen table, papers spread between them as they pieced together the extent of Maxwell's deception. "You really didn't know?" Jack asked, studying her face in the dim kitchen light. "My father died 3 years ago. Maxwell's father stepped down soon after. I've been so focused on keeping the company afloat, preparing for the IPO." Her voice trailed off. "I should have known, should have looked deeper." "Why are you risking everything now?" Jack pressed. "This could tank your company before it goes public. You stand to lose billions." Natalie was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "My parents were researchers before they started the company. They believed in science that helps people, not exploits them." She looked up at Jack. "What's the point of all this success if it comes at the cost of people like Sarah? People like Lily?" For the first time since they'd met, Jack saw beyond Natalie's corporate armor to the woman beneath. Someone carrying the weight of a legacy she hadn't fully understood until now. "Dad?" Lily's small voice came from the hallway. She stood in her pajamas holding a small photo frame. "I had the dream again." Jack opened his arms and Lily climbed onto his lap. "The one about Mom?" She nodded against his chest. "She was trying to tell me something important, but I couldn't hear her." Natalie noticed the frame held a photograph of a smiling woman with Lily's eyes and Jack's determined expression. Sarah Bennett, no longer just a name in a database, but a real person who had been loved. "Maybe she was saying she loves you?" Natalie offered softly. That never stops, you know, even when people are gone. Lily regarded her thoughtfully. Did someone you love go away too? My parents, when I was 16. The admission surprised Natalie herself. That's why you work so hard, Lily observed with a child's uncanny perception. You're trying to make them proud. The simple truth of it struck Natalie silent. Jack met her eyes over his daughter's head. Something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared wounds that had shaped them both. The following week unfolded in a carefully orchestrated dance of investigation and strategy. Natalie provided access to secure servers, while Jack analyzed medical data with the precision that had once made him a renowned surgeon. They discovered over 200 cases like Sarah's, patients who had suffered severe side effects or died during Orpheus trials, all records buried under classification codes that hid them from standard reviews. Eleanor Hughes proved an unexpected ally, providing historical context and internal documents that Maxwell had kept from Natalie. He and his father always resented that your father built this company, Eleanor confided one evening in Natalie's office. Stephen Gray wanted his son to inherit the CEO position. When the board chose you instead, he decided to undermine me, Natalie finished. His ego couldn't handle it, Eleanor added, especially after you ended your brief relationship with him. Natalie winced at the memory. Dating Maxwell was a mistake I made when I first joined the board. I ended it when I saw his ruthless side, his willingness to cut corners on patient safety for profit margins. A side he inherited from his father? Eleanor nodded. The board meeting next week before the IPO? He's planning to present evidence that you've been negligent, push for your removal. That night, Natalie found herself at Jack's apartment again. These evening strategy sessions had become almost routine. Lily working on her memory games or practicing chess moves her father had taught her, while the adults pored over documents and built their case. Maxwell's been siphoning research funds into shell companies, Natalie explained, showing Jack the financial trails she'd uncovered. Setting up manufacturing in countries with minimal oversight. A crash from the living room interrupted them. They rushed in to find Lily on the floor, her breathing labored, face alarmingly pale. Lily! Jack dropped to his knees, medical instincts taking over. Where's your pain? Chest, she gasped. Can't breathe. Call 911, Jack ordered Natalie. Then bring me her medication from the bathroom cabinet. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the waiting room as Jack paced relentlessly. Natalie sat perfectly still, her corporate poise masking the turmoil beneath. A man in a dark suit approached the nurse's station, flashing credentials and asking questions while glancing toward Jack. Natalie recognized him instantly. Parker, Maxwell's head of security. Jack, she whispered urgently. That man works for Maxwell. He's watching us. Jack's expression hardened as he intercepted Parker near the vending machines. Natalie couldn't hear their exchange, but watched as Parker's smug expression gave way to shock when Jack grabbed his arm and spoke intensely into his ear. When Jack returned, his face was ashen. What happened? Natalie asked. Parker admitted Maxwell personally approved adding Sarah to the Orpheus trial, Jack said, voice hollow. He knew about her pre-existing condition, knew it made her high risk. They needed subjects with her specific cardiac profile, and Maxwell overrode the safety protocols. The doctor emerged before Natalie could respond, looking grim. The arrhythmia is worsening. She needs the enhanced treatment protocol, a combination of medication and minimally invasive surgery. What's the cost? Jack asked, already knowing the answer would be devastating. The procedure is $175,000. Insurance typically covers about 30%. Jack's face went blank, the expression of someone accustomed to impossible choices. I'll figure something out. When the doctor left, Natalie touched Jack's arm. Let me help. We don't need charity, he said stiffly. It's not charity, it's justice. Her voice was firm. Carson Pharmaceuticals owes your family this and more. 2 days later, when Lily had been stabilized and scheduled for surgery, Jack found Natalie in the hospital cafeteria, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. "Why are you still here?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "You have an empire to save." "Some things are more important." She looked up at him, her professional mask completely gone. "I've been thinking about what Lily said, about making my parents proud. I'm not sure they would be. If they could see what the company has become." Jack studied her for a long moment. "What will you do?" "Stop the IPO, restructure the company, make it what it was meant to be." She reached across the table, hesitantly touching his hand. "But I need your help to stop Maxwell first." The day of the board meeting arrived with the weight of inevitable confrontation. Natalie entered the boardroom dressed in her armor, a perfectly tailored suit, not a hair out of place. Only the slight shadows beneath her eyes hinted at the sleepless nights of preparation. Maxwell Gray sat at the opposite end of the table, confidence emanating from him like a physical force. His smile held the satisfaction of a predator about to strike. "Before we begin," he announced smoothly, "I have some concerns about the company's direction under current leadership." He distributed folders to each board member. "Evidence of negligent oversight that has put our IPO at risk." Murmurs rippled around the table as board members reviewed the carefully curated documents, all designed to suggest Natalie had missed critical warning signs in drug development pipelines. Natalie allowed them a moment to absorb Maxwell's accusations before standing. "Mr. Gray has raised important concerns about oversight," she began, her voice steady, though not in the way he intended. The boardroom doors opened and Jack entered, followed by Eleanor and a sharp-eyed woman Natalie introduced as Sophia Pierce, former prosecutor now specializing in pharmaceutical law. "What is this?" Maxwell demanded, his composure cracking slightly. "This is Dr. Jack Bennett," Natalie replied. "His wife Sarah died during an unauthorized trial of an experimental drug, a trial you personally approved despite knowing the risks." For the next 30 minutes, Jack methodically presented the medical evidence they'd compiled, the pattern of concealed side effects, the manipulated trial data, the deaths that had been systematically buried. Eleanor provided historical context, revealing how Maxwell had compartmentalized information, ensuring Natalie and the board remained unaware of Orpheus's true nature. Sophia outlined the legal ramifications: multiple violations of FDA regulations, fraud, potentially criminal negligence resulting in death. As Maxwell's face drained of color, Natalie delivered the final blow. "Representatives from the FDA Enforcement Division are currently executing warrants at our research facilities." She placed a USB drive on the table. "Everything has been documented and secured. The IPO cannot and will not proceed until this company is cleansed of these practices." Maxwell lunged for the door, only to find two FDA agents waiting outside. The board watched in stunned silence as the man who had nearly seized control of their company was escorted from the building. In the aftermath, as the boardroom emptied, Natalie remained seated, the weight of victory feeling nothing like she had imagined. Jack touched her shoulder gently. "You did it." "We did it," she corrected, "though the hard part is just beginning." 6 months later, Central Park bloomed with spring's renewal, cherry blossoms dotting the pathways with delicate pink. Natalie Carson, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, so different from her former corporate uniform, walked alongside Jack Bennett. Ahead of them, Lily raced along the path, her recovery complete, her energy boundless as she called back to them about a duck pond just around the corner. "The Sarah Bennett Foundation approved its first research grant yesterday," Natalie said, "focused on affordable treatments for pediatric cardiac conditions." Jack nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in his expression. She would have liked that. "The press coverage has been remarkable," Natalie continued. 3 more pharmaceutical companies have announced similar transparency initiatives. The industry is calling it the Bennett Standard for ethical drug development. And Maxwell, Jack asked, facing 20 years. His father testified against him to save the family name. Natalie's voice held no satisfaction, only quiet resolve. The settlement fund has already helped over 100 families affected by Orpheus. Carson Pharmaceuticals had undergone a transformation that financial analysts still struggled to comprehend. Voluntarily recalling dangerous medications, restructuring pricing models, and establishing transparent research protocols that were setting new industry standards. Jack had returned to medicine, heading the company's new clinical research division with its emphasis on ethical trials and patient advocacy. The board still thinks I'm crazy, Natalie admitted with a small smile. Postponing the IPO indefinitely, prioritizing affordable access over profit margins. Are they wrong? Jack asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. Maybe, she conceded. But for the first time since my parents died, I feel like I'm building something worthwhile. She paused, watching Lily, who had stopped to examine a butterfly that had landed on a park bench. I spent my entire life building a company, but never built a life. Jack's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that still surprised them both. It's never too late to start again. Lily looked back at them, her face brightening as she held up her hand, the butterfly still perched on her finger, wings slowly opening and closing. Natalie felt something expand in her chest, a sensation so foreign yet so essential that she finally recognized it for what it was: belonging, purpose, perhaps even happiness. As they continued their walk through the park, the three of them moving together like a family still finding its rhythm, Natalie realized that some whispered truths were worth hearing, no matter how painful the revelation. Sometimes you had to lose everything you thought mattered to find what truly did.